First of all, looking back at when I moved to Japan and my first 1.5 or so years here, I must say in hindsight, it was a bit lonely. And I think many people coming to Japan feel that way. It was, of course, exciting, but at the same time, shocking. Shocking because things that I thought were basic human behavior turned out to be cultural achievements. So something learned rather than intrinsic to every human being. And there were a couple of things like that. And also, of course, being from a different culture, not really understanding the language, not really understanding the culture itself, it was rather difficult for me to integrate, find friends and all that. And that being said, I'm also naturally not the most sociable person, I think. I don't make friends that easily, and that made it rather lonely. When I then joined the company, this changed. I all of a sudden was in a Japanese team, only Japanese people back then, and had to use Japanese that I didn't use at home. I had contacts, I could go out with people. I was more integrated. So joining a Japanese company definitely improved my life here in Japan. Now, it is fantastic weather today, and it would be a shame if I wouldn't use that to show you a little bit of Japan. Nagano Station just looks fantastic. Every time again, beautiful. Nothing else to say. I needed to equip myself against the sun. It's almost October, but it's still 27 degrees or so. And as I'm very white, I also get very red very easily. I've worked for a Japanese company for almost 4.5 years in IT. I was an engineer and a manager, and I also talked to other people about their experiences living in Japan. So when I'm talking about something negatively in particular in this video, then please assume that it's not about my previous employer, but about somebody else's. This is something I really like about Japan. On the one side, you have a rather busy road, bigger road, and then next to it, a small little shrine, very peaceful and quiet. Japan is, of course, infamous for its work morale and long hours. You will indeed be required by some companies to sign something that allows them to make you work overtime for free up to a certain amount, for example, 20 hours a month or so. So that definitely happens. In that case, you don't get any compensation, no holiday as a replacement, no money, no nothing. Other companies, and thankfully mine was one of them, have a flex time system, which means you probably have some core hours, and then outside of that, you are free to start or end whenever you want. You can work a little longer, a little less, and balance it out. And in my case, overtime was even compensated up to a certain grade. There might be group pressure to work more. For me, for example, I tried to start always at 7 a.m. so that I can leave at 4 p.m. 8 hours of working, 1 hour break, and then go home, have time with my family. However, many members of my team started later, and that meant when I left, they were still working hard. And then I sometimes had the feeling, is it really okay to leave? Can I do that if they work another 2 hours or so? Wouldn't it be better for me to be here? But most of the time I stayed focused and disciplined and actually went home when I should go home. On some rare occasions I would stay longer to get something done or so. Overtime for me, sometimes, but not on an excessive level. For you, if you plan on working in Japan, maybe it's a good idea to ask in the interview, your first or so interview with your future team colleagues, how many hours of overtime did you do last month? And by that get an idea on how the company's culture is. Just a couple of meters over there, there's the big road and the big buildings, and here it looks like this. The river, the mountains, everything green, and of course power lines, because no Japanese scenery is perfect without power lines. It's getting uphill now, we can already overlook Nagano City, and if you are a regular viewer of this channel, then of course you know that I like anything that is not uphill. So, swearing ahead, you have been warned. You realize I have to do all of this twice because I put the camera there and then walk back. holidays. Legally, you get 10 days off per year in Japan, without going too much into the details. And most companies will probably follow this rule, and that means, well, you take off whenever you want to ideally, or if your company allows. Unfortunately, these 10 days also include sick days. So you're sick, well, take a day off. You're sick for a week, well, you only have 5 days left. Bad for you. And a European from Germany, where you have infinite sick leaves, that was a really big shock, and I actually didn't know that until I had already signed the contract and moved to Yokohama to work in Tokyo. And then I met with my recruiters and they mentioned that, and I was like, okay, I had the suspicion, but right, okay, I see. But generally that's what we have to work with. I guess depending on where you're from, that's good or normal or bad. For Europeans it's bad, for Americans it might be good, for Chinese I think it's also good. In Japan you also have 16 national holidays, which usually you can take off, so that's pretty nice. Also weekends off, of course, at least in IT. Some job descriptions I checked back then actually said 50 days off per year. I'm like, okay, not bad. And then wait. That's the weekends you're talking about. And that's certainly nothing I could ever agree to. And at my company, thankfully, it wasn't like that. And well, the longer you are in a company in Japan, the more holidays you usually get. So after 1 year, you get 11 days. And then 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And 20 is usually the limit. But then, of course, that's also an incentive to stay with your company. Because if you leave, go somewhere else, you will be back to 10. This is why sometimes you should leave the main road and go somewhere off the beaten path to find bamboo forests. Some companies realize that this is not a good situation and offer sick leaves, by which of course they become very attractive. All of a sudden you can get sick and still visit your family back home and all that. Of course, this sick leave situation is also not the greatest when it comes to general health in an office, because if somebody is sick, they don't take a day off. They take their masks, put it on and go to the office. And then of course everybody gets infected. There are mosquitoes everywhere. Next is pay. Pay, I worked in IT. I didn't work as an English teacher. I didn't work in a convenience store. I didn't work in a startup. I worked in a big global Japanese company in IT. And their pay is kind of okay. It's not comparable to Silicon Valley salaries, but you are probably in the upper third or so of society when it comes to income, and you're alone. And you can definitely live off of that. Entry-level salaries are not as good compared to other countries from what I've heard, but then again, you can work your way up from there and will probably soon catch up. Fucking hell. There's always a shrine somewhere to be explored. Some of you may want to become parents. Isn't that big? At some point in their life. And in Japan, you can get up to 1 year of parental leave also for dads. That being said, there was the occasion that somebody wanted to take off 2 months of paternity leave. Now, why just 2 months? Because in the first 6 months you will receive 60% of your pay, and in the last 6 months 50%. So it's a pay cut. And this person wanted to take 2 months, but was then pressured from their manager into taking only 1. So not an okay situation, not legally correct, but it happens. And it also happens that people tell you, because of your team, because of the company, you cannot take it or cannot take the whole length or whatever. However, my advice to you is, keep in mind that your family needs you much more than your company, and your company can live without you for a year or so. And your career will not die because you take some time off. You might arrive at a company, some people might have worked at a company that wants to be international, that wants to be a global company and hire international talent, and that makes the company's language English, for example. However, this internationalization might be driven by people that never have lived abroad. That means there is no understanding for cultural differences, for the hardships somebody such as me and you might experience when living abroad and working at a foreign company, foreign for me and you. This of course leads to issues, as in, on the one hand we want to be global, on the other hand we are very uncomfortable with anything that is not done in a Japanese way, which then for international people usually results in some kind of glass ceiling. That means you can progress to a certain point in your career, but then you might hit somewhere where you cannot figure out how to progress. And because of the constellation of how it is in your company, you have no way of finding out how to proceed. Nobody's telling you. You don't have the experiences and insight some people above you expect you to have based on their own upbringing and non-international experience. Corporatism is a thing here. That means focusing on pleasing your superior rather than your actual target group, which is your customer. Also, this being Japan, there might be a Japanese-ish attitude focused on harmony rather than being direct and concrete. And some nationalities, such as Germans, which tend to be direct, can be too direct, and this can be seen as a confrontation, as a conflict, or even as an insult. This longing for harmony then might result in a focus on business as usual, keeping the status quo, as opposed to identifying issues, trying to think about strategy, about visions, about the future. This right here, I don't know if you could see that, is actually pretty big. There are lots of meetings and unfortunately also nemawashi. Nemawashi means talking to people about what you will say beforehand. For example, there's a meeting with 3 executives, and before the meeting you talk to each and every one of them about what you want to talk about in the meeting. You get their input and their understanding, so that then in the meeting, when everybody's together, when they are in front of each other, there are no surprises. So surprises, no good idea in Japan. Nemawashi, good idea. Is it fun, especially as somebody who's not used to that? Not at all. For me personally, the work morale, the diligency was outstanding. When being at work, the work gets done. There is absolute focus, no slacking off, no being on social media and so on. And it was of course very challenging there. And when I looked back after 6 months, I still remember, I was amazed at how much I had grown as a professional. Of course, not everything went perfect. There have been conflicts, but solving those properly is also a great learning experience in itself. Eventually, I moved on. I quit, I left the company. And if you want to know why I actually did that, then you can have a look at this video here. It's easy, just click it. It's right there.